What if the most quoted verse of comfort in the entire Bible was first mailed to people who were never going home again? We hand this verse to graduates. We slip it into cards for the grieving. We frame it on our walls. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. It is beautiful. It is also one of the most misunderstood sentences in all of Scripture, because almost none of us have ever read the return address on the envelope. We kept the promise and lost the letter. This verse did not begin on a coffee mug. It began as a letter, carried by hand from Jerusalem to Babylon, handed to a generation who had lost everything. Their homes were gone, their temple was rubble, and the headline of that same letter was brutal. Nobody reading it was going home, not this year. Not in 5 years. Most of them, not ever. Maybe that lands closer than you would like. Maybe someone handed you this verse when you were sitting with a diagnosis, and it felt less like comfort and more like a bill you could not pay. Maybe it was quoted at you when the job fell through, when the marriage went quiet, when you had prayed the same prayer for years and heard nothing back. And underneath the kindness sat a quiet promise that if you just believed hard enough, the outcome would change. Then it did not, and you were left holding a verse that felt like it had lied to you. Here's what changes everything. Once you know where these words actually came from, this verse stops being a fragile wish about your circumstances and starts carrying far more weight than that. Because the two words we translate as hope and a future are not soft words in Hebrew. One of them has an actual rope inside it, the kind you could tie to a window and trust with the weight of a human body. The other is not about next month at all. It is a word about where your whole story finally lands. So let us open the letter and read it the way its first readers did. So let us start where the promise actually started, with the letter itself, because the setting does most of the quiet pastoral work here. In the year 597 before Christ, the army of Babylon came to Jerusalem for the second time, and the city surrendered. The king walked out and gave himself up. He was barely 18 years old, and he had been on the throne for only about 3 months. Babylon took him east, and it did not take him alone. The chapter is very careful about who else was loaded onto that road. It names the king, the queen mother, the palace officials, the leaders of the land, and then 2 groups you might not expect, the craftsmen and the metal workers. That last detail tells you exactly what kind of deportation this was. Babylon was not simply punishing a rebellious province, it was harvesting it. The strongest were taken so the empire could grow stronger. The people who could build things, forge things, and run things were pulled out and relocated to strengthen the very empire that had conquered them. Judah kept its farmers, it lost its skilled hands. And the letter we are talking about was written to those exiles by a prophet back in Jerusalem named Jeremiah, a man who had spent decades saying things nobody wanted to hear. Now here is where it gets strange. When that letter finally reached them, what it told them to do sounded almost insulting. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat what they grow, get married, have sons and daughters, and let your children have children of their own. Think about what that actually means. You do not plant a garden for a 2-year stay. You do not build a house you expect to walk away from. Fig trees and date palms take years before they give you anything back. God was telling these people to sink roots into the soil of the country that had just carried them off in chains, and we know they did it. Archaeologists working with clay tablets from ancient Babylon have found records of a settlement with a name that means, more or less, the town of Judah. The tablets are not dramatic. They are ordinary business documents, land leases, rental agreements, records of barley harvests and taxes paid to the crown. One tablet has a man from Judah leasing a field, another lists grain owed at harvest time, and that ordinariness is exactly the point. Generation after generation, families with Hebrew names were farming, trading, signing contracts, and passing property to their children, in the land that had taken their grandparents by force. That is this promise written out in clay by the very people who first received it. Then comes the line almost everyone skips. God tells them to seek the welfare of the city where they are held captive and to pray to the Lord on its behalf, because in its welfare they will find their own. Read that again. Pray for Babylon. Work for the good of the place holding you prisoner. That is an enormous thing to ask of people whose city had just been broken open. And the Hebrew word sitting under that word welfare is a word we are going to come back to, because it quietly changes how the whole promise reads. But before any of that, the exiles had a decision to make. Because there was another voice in the room, and it was promising them something far easier to believe. And that brings us to the second thing you have to see before the promise makes any sense: the competing message that was already going around. One chapter earlier, a prophet named Hananiah had stood up in the temple courts with an announcement, and it was everything the people wanted to hear. Within 2 years, he said, God would break the grip of Babylon, bring back the treasures taken from the temple, and return the exiled king along with everyone carried off with him. 2 years. Then, to drive the point home, he took the wooden yoke off of Jeremiah's neck, the symbol of the coming servitude, and he snapped it in half in front of the crowd. It was a wonderful message. It was also completely false. Jeremiah told him so to his face. And that same year, Hananiah died. So picture the moment the real letter arrives in Babylon. These people already had a number ringing in their ears. 2 years from a man who sounded absolutely certain. And now here comes a letter from that unpopular prophet back in Jerusalem, and it carries a very different number: 70 years. Anyone could do the math, and the math was devastating. A 40-year-old man hearing that letter would be 110 by the time it was over. He himself would almost certainly be buried in Babylon. His children would be old. His grandchildren would be the ones packing for the trip home. That is the room this promise was spoken into. Those are the people who received verse 11. Not a graduating class, not a couple starting a new business. A generation being told, in plain language, that the answer was no for the rest of their natural lives. And notice how the promise is built. The verse right before it sets the terms. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, God says, I will come to you and fulfill my promise to bring you back to this place. The famous words about plans and hope and a future are bolted directly onto that sentence. They do not float free. They arrive already dated, and the date sits far past the horizon of most of the lives reading it. Sit with how heavy that is for a moment. This is not a promise that your hard season will be short. The chapter says the opposite, out loud, with a specific number attached. It is not a promise that you will personally see the outcome you are praying for. These exiles wanted one thing: to go home, and God's answer was that their great-grandchildren would go home. Whatever comfort this verse is offering, it is not the comfort of a quick rescue, which is exactly why the word we casually translate as hope has to be doing something far stronger than we assume. Because if hope here just means a warm wish that things work out soon, then this letter is almost cruel. But the Hebrew is not describing a wish at all. It is describing something you can grip with your hands. And once you see what that word actually is, this entire verse stops comforting you the way a card does and starts holding you the way a rope does. So here is the first of the two words, and it is the one hiding in plain sight. In English, we say hope, and most of the time, when we say it, we mean a wish with the confidence turned down. I hope it does not rain. I hope the test results come back clean. English hope is the thing you reach for when you have nothing more solid to hold. It leans on feelings, and feelings run out. The Hebrew word Jeremiah actually used is tikva, and it is built out of something completely different. Tikva is a noun that grows out of the verb kava. That verb means to wait, but do not picture someone sitting still, passively hoping the time passes. The waiting inside kava has tension in it. It is the posture of a person leaning forward, straining towards something that has not arrived yet, eyes fixed on the horizon. You have actually heard this verb before. It is the word in that famous line, "Those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will rise up on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary." In English, that sounds restful, almost sleepy. In Hebrew, it has a body in it. Weight shifted forward. Muscles engaged. Attention locked on something up ahead. Now here is the detail that changes the entire picture. The same three consonants that build tikva also build a word that means to bind or to twist together. And the noun tikva shows up elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, meaning a literal, physical cord, a rope. Go back to the book of Joshua, chapter 2. 2 Israelite spies are hiding inside the walls of Jericho in the house of a woman named Rahab. When soldiers come looking, she protects them, and then she lowers them down the outside of the city wall through her window using a rope. Before they climb down, they tell her to tie something in that same window, a marker, so that when the army comes, her house will be spared. And the word for the cord she ties in the window is tikva. It shows up again a few lines later, when she does exactly as they said, and ties the scarlet cord in the window. Same word. In Jeremiah, translators reach for hope. In Joshua, they reach for cord, or line, or rope. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the place where word studies go off the rails. The Hebrew dictionaries are not perfectly unanimous. Many of them treat the weighting sense and the binding sense as one single root that shares a single idea, a cord pulled tight, tension held. A few list them as two separate words that just happen to look alike. Either way, the picture holds, and it does not depend on winning that debate, because Joshua uses this exact noun for an actual rope hanging out of an actual window. That is the word doing plain, ordinary work, with no clever theory required. So when the exiles heard tikva, they were hearing a word that lives in the same neighborhood as rope, something with tensile strength, something that holds weight when you pull on it. And Scripture's honest enough to use that word even when the news is bad. In the middle of his suffering, Job says his days are running out with no tikva left. Elsewhere, he asks where his hope has gone, and answers that the thing he was waiting for has been torn up like a tree pulled out by the roots. The Book of Lamentations, written after Jerusalem finally fell, says the same thing again and again. Endurance has perished. The strength to keep waiting is gone, and that tells you exactly what despair actually feels like from the inside. It is the sensation of a line going slack in your hands. Or worse, a line that has been cut, with nothing left on the other end. Which is precisely why the promise in Jeremiah 29 lands the way it does. God is not handing these people a good feeling about the future. He is telling them that something is on the other end of the rope. Someone is holding it. The line runs all the way from a mud brick house in Babylon to the throne of the God who put them there and fully intends to bring them out. You cannot see the far end. And the tension in your hands is still completely real. Quick pause before we follow that rope any further. If this is opening the verse up for you, take 1 second to hit subscribe. It is completely free, and it keeps these studies coming. And if you want to go deeper with us, you can join as a channel member using the link below. To everyone already supporting this work, thank you. You genuinely make it possible. Now, back to that rope and where it is tied. That is the first word. Now for the second one, the word we hurry past every single time, a future. In English, it sounds like a calendar, like next month or next year, like the thing you are impatient for. But the Hebrew word underneath it, akaret, is pointing somewhere else entirely. Akaret means the latter end of a thing, the outcome, what something finally comes to when it has fully run its course. Scripture uses it for the end of a life, the end of a nation, the end of a whole matter. Some of the older English translations reached for the phrase an expected end, which is clumsy, but it is honest. It gets at the real idea. God is not making a promise about your next few weeks. He is making a promise about how the whole thing finally turns out. So hear what God is actually saying to these exiles. In effect, the end of this story is mine, and the end of it is good. That one shift reframes the 70 years without erasing a single one of them. The exiles were being told that the shape of their situation right now says nothing reliable about where God is taking them. Babylon was real. The chains were real. The grief was real. But Babylon was not the accurate. Babylon was not the end of the sentence. It was the middle of it. And here is the part almost nobody reads, because most of us stop at verse 11. But the paragraph keeps going, and it tells you exactly what that good outcome is actually made of. Listen to the very next lines. Then you will call on me, and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will let you find me, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back from captivity and gather you from all the places where I have scattered you. Sit with what stands at the center of that promised future. It is not first a new house. It is not first a new job. It is prayer that finally gets heard. It is a God who lets himself be found.
It is a scattered, broken people being gathered back together.
The homecoming is in there, absolutely. But notice where it sits. It comes last, after the relationship has been repaired. That is what all the plans were quietly aiming at the entire time. So think about what those 70 years were really doing. They were accomplishing something that no calendar could ever measure. A whole people were slowly learning to seek God with their entire heart, in a place where nothing about their surroundings encouraged it, where every sign around them said they had been forgotten. The waiting was not empty time. The waiting was the point. Put the two words back together now, and the promise stands up straight. Hope is a cord you can grip, tied to someone who is holding the other end. And the future is not next month. It is the outcome, and the outcome belongs to God. A rope in your hand, and a good end you cannot yet see, which leaves one question. If you cannot see the far end of the rope, what exactly is it tied to? Because a cord is only ever as trustworthy as the thing on the other side. And the New Testament picks up this exact image and ties it to a place these exiles could never have imagined. So follow the rope all the way to its far end, into the New Testament, into a passage that could have been written for these exiles. The book of Hebrews, chapter 6, takes this very idea and calls hope a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. And then it says something remarkable. This hope enters into the inner place, behind the curtain, where Jesus has already gone ahead of us as a forerunner on our behalf. Stay with that image, because an anchor works exactly the way tikva works. An anchor does absolutely nothing while it is sitting on the deck of the boat. It is just dead weight in the corner. It only starts to work the moment it is thrown overboard, out of sight, down into waters so dark you cannot see through it, until it catches on something solid far below that you will never lay eyes on. Then, and only then, the rope pulls tight, and the drifting stops. And the writer of Hebrews says that line, that rope of hope, runs straight into the sanctuary, into the very presence of God. And Jesus walked in there first, and he is holding the other end. The exiles held a rope whose far end they could not see. This is where it was finally tied. That, right there, is the whole difference between hope as a feeling and hope as a cord. A feeling depends on how strong your grip is on any given day. A cord depends entirely on what it is tied to, and those are not the same thing at all. Some mornings you can barely hold on. Some mornings you have nothing left in your hands. And the anchor does not move 1 inch, because your strength was never the thing making it hold in the first place. Go back and look at Rahab one more time. She hung a scarlet cord out of a window in a city that was about to be leveled. That rope did not save her because she gripped it tightly or believed in it hard enough. It saved her because of the promise attached to the far end of it, made by men who kept their word. The cord was only as good as the ones holding the other side, and they came through. The rope held because the promise held. Now, here is the part I honestly cannot stop thinking about. Consider how rope was actually made in the ancient world. It was made from plant fiber, from the fiber of date palms, from flax, sometimes from reeds or grass, whatever happened to grow nearby. Archaeologists have pulled preserved rope out of dry sites in Egypt and the Judean desert, and you can still see exactly how it was put together. Take a single fiber from a palm frond and pull on it. It snaps, thin, brittle, and next to useless on its own. You could not hang a bucket from it, let alone lower a grown person down a city wall, so the rope maker twists. Individual fibers get spun together into a strand. Then strands get twisted against each other, in the opposite direction. And that counter twist is the entire secret. Every part is straining to unwind, but because they are wound against one another, they lock. The harder you pull, the tighter they grip. And any weight placed on the rope gets shared out across every single fiber in the bundle. Nothing in there carries the load alone. That is the physical object sitting inside the Hebrew word for hope. Individual threads that could hold nothing by themselves, bound together under tension, until they become something strong enough to hold the weight of a human body. So whatever else the exiles heard when they heard the word tikva, they were hearing something that had been engineered to bear weight. Not a mood, not a wish, a working rope, something built to carry you. And that changes what you do with your hands on an ordinary, difficult day. Because if hope were just a feeling, you would be lost the moment the feeling faded. But if hope is a cord, then the question is never how tightly you are holding on. The question is what it is tied to and whether the one on the other end will keep his word. So, let us bring this all the way down, out of the ancient world, and into your actual life this week. So here's the last piece, and it is the one that actually has to survive contact with a real Tuesday, because it is one thing to find this beautiful in a video. It is another thing entirely to hold it at 2 a.m, when the thing you were afraid of has already happened. Remember, the people we met at the very beginning. Someone handed a verse alongside a diagnosis. Someone who prayed the same prayer for years and heard nothing. Someone sitting in the quiet after the job fell through, after the marriage went cold, after the answer they needed simply did not come. If that is you, hear this carefully, because the exiles are actually good news for you, and not the cheap kind. This verse was never a promise that your hard season would be short. We have to be honest about that, or we just become Hananiah, standing in the temple promising 2 years and a quick rescue that never arrives. That kind of hope breaks people, because it ties them to an outcome they picked on a timeline they set, and when it does not come, they conclude that God failed them. But that was never the promise. The promise is that the end of your story belongs to God, and the end of it is good, even if the middle looks nothing like it. So, what do you actually do with your hands on a hard day? You stop grading the rope by whatever the weather is inside you that morning. Some days you will barely hold on, and that is allowed, because your grip was never the thing making it hold. Your job on the worst days is not to feel hopeful. Your job is simply to not let go of the rope. And then, strangely, you do the most ordinary things. Remember what God told the exiles to do while they waited. Build houses, plant gardens, raise your children. Pray for the city that is not your home. In other words, live faithfully in the unresolved middle. Do not put your whole life on pause until the answer comes. Plant something, even here. Love someone, even now. Keep showing up, even before the outcome you are aching for is anywhere in sight. That is what it looks like to trust a good end you cannot yet see. And keep seeking, because that turned out to be the real center of the whole promise. The exiles were told they would find God when they sought him with all their heart, right there in Babylon, not after they got home. So the presence you are desperate for is not on the far side of your circumstances changing. It is available in the middle of them, in the exact place you least expected to find it, in the very season you assumed God had gone silent. Because here is what actually held those people for 70 long years. It was not optimism. Optimism runs out somewhere around year 3. What held them was a rope with a promise on the far end, tied to a God who keeps his word, and who was already at work on an ending they trusted long before they could ever see it. That is the hope and the future that this verse is really offering you. Not a guarantee about next month. A cord you can grip when you have nothing left, tied to the one place strong enough to hold you. So let us go back to where we started, to the letter, and to the return address almost nobody reads. So here is the return address almost nobody reads. This verse was never a fragile wish printed on a mug. It was a letter, carried into the worst year of a people's life, telling them that the God who allowed the exile was already holding the far end of the rope. That is what we hand each other when we quote it. Not a promise that the pain will be brief, a promise that the pain is not the end of the sentence. So, the next time someone gives you Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11, you will know what is actually inside it. A hope you can grip like a cord, a future that means the outcome, and the outcome belongs to God. And an anchor that has already gone ahead of you into the one place strong enough to hold. If this opened up the verse in a way that helps you hold on today, do a few small things for me. Tap the like button. It quietly helps this study reach the next person who needs it. Subscribe, so the next one lands in front of you when you need it. And leave a comment with the word or the verse you want us to open up next. I read them, and they genuinely shape what we make. And if this helped, pass it to the one person you know who is sitting in their own Babylon right now. And let me leave you with this. May you hold the rope on the days you cannot feel it and cannot see the far end. May you seek him and actually find him right in the middle, long before the circumstances change. And may the God of all hope fill you with peace as you trust in him, so that your tikva, your cord, holds firm, all the way to the good end he has already promised. Amen.